Greetings and salutations to whoever is listening to this recording, which may, pardon me, I'm adjusting positions, and that made noise, so I'm going to take two. Greetings and salutations to anyone out there in the multiverse who may be listening to this recording, as it may or may not turn out to be a podcast. Let's see if DJ Zed is... Oh, yeah, I got to undo that to let that happen, don't I? Yes, I do. All right, take three. Welcome to the show, folks. I'm your awkward host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. And this is a behind-the-scenes look at the Almost Daily Variety live stream show as part of my overall content creation process. I'm struck by an idea. And the music should now be sort of flowing to you here in the background. It may or may not be super great, loud. Let me max it out there. I can maybe even tweak it a little bit more this way. But I gotta remember to take it back. Welcome! So here's the idea that's part of the Wattpad storytelling development process that's a slow grind over there. Imagine a world where all international conflict is negotiated strictly through the use of an immersive, hyper-realistic, but yet totally humanitarianly safe and non-lethal form of gaming as like trial by combat in virtual realms of slightly different but very hyper-realistic settings. And that's the sort of launching point that all of the Zeppoverse is nested in a spoken yet unspoken way sometimes. And of course in a sort of deep like tunnel of like there are reveals within reveals and stories are nested within stories kind of way. But I just wanted to capture that idea and share it. I don't know if I had more to talk about it or not, but I am sort of getting ready to launch my show on the live stream, in which I'm probably going to talk about that. But I haven't swapped the inputs. Oh, that can wait. There's an update. Ideas come to me at the craziest times when I'm not like set up to like. This idea just started happening in my head. I'm like, well, I'm about to do a show where I'm not writing. I committed to doing a video gaming show this evening because it's Call of Duty Mobile Afterglow after Call of Duty Next. And that's part of the inspiration. Like, that video game title is a whole franchise of great renown in the video gaming world. And of course, it's based in part on real-world ingredients, to put it one way. And I feel like I'm competing with the music. I got tuned it back down anyways, if I'm actually going to go live on the live stream. That music is way too loud, I realized, after reviewing some older videos. But yeah, these ideas come to me sometimes in the middle of a game, and be like, oh my gosh, can you imagine a scene between a set of characters that are playing a video game, but that you've become immersed in this episode, this movie episode, let's say, where they are whatever they were before they stepped into this metaversal sort of immersion place. They're now in a sort of long-term, protracted trial by combat to decide some critical, important, plot-driven story motive that's got to do with international intrigue and whatnot. And then, like, how would the scenes play out, and how would you homage the video games, all of them of every kind, that might inform such scenes? And what would the like cartoon version versus the comic book version versus the video game version versus the cinematic live action with many is it CGI, is it not CGI special effects attempted to like boggle the mind, and how would I build it? It's a daunting task, but I know that I've got some ideas going, and that I invite you to check out Wattpad Wednesdays, when I actually sit down and force myself to stare at the blank page as opposed to any other screen. And that's the critical factor, right? Like, if an idea comes to me, the best I can do is talk about it on the air and or remember to tape record while I talk about it on the air, and then hope that someday I'll circle back and go, oh yeah, I made that a podcast episode, didn't I? Oh yeah, I need to write down that stuff and draft out ideas based on whatever it is I rambled about. Thus, this recording, which may or may not be very long. If it's under a certain amount of time, I may just keep it and play it live on the air later if I can teleport it to myself. But then again, there's no rule about making an episode that's under 15 minutes long. Like, I could say thank you for tuning in for that little thought capture. I think that's all I got. I feel a little tapped out, although I guess I could roleplay my way into it. How does Mr. Zeppo tie in? Well, there's actually a lot of questions I could dive into from a world-building perspective. One place I could sort of lay as the landmark title is The Many Adventures of DJ Zed and Mr. Zeppo, which is sort of a backstory title, which may or may not evolve into a 3-part book series in and of itself, in which one of the many interpretations of how a DJ Zed and Mr. Zeppo characters came to be, and I haven't quite decided if this is set in like the 70s, 80s, 90s of like real-time Planet Stone, vis-a-vis the whatever decades those may feel like to you nostalgically as either lived experience, part of your childhood, or, right before you existed kind of, historical record or whatnot. But whatever version of planet Mudwater and trees you live on, which is the way one planet Earth calls itself, imagine, sort of, it's already an exhausted, nostalgic place, but the 80s, 90s, and early aughts reinterpreted in a sort of, if it had been some interesting, inspired by its own past science fiction, steampunky, slightly more futuristic version of itself, that then has a really, really super intense, hyper futuristic version of itself, but and keeps an homage and a nod and a shucks, isn't that funny, wink and a nod, tip of the hat reference, MacGuffin, one-liners and objects and scene settings from the spectrum of all the stuff that's in our collective consciousness, from Star Trek to Tolkien, and my own kooky inventions, wherein the tentpole characters is the very person himself, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, which I sort of pretend to play at, who has lived multiple lives, it should be said. No matter how you slice it, if he is in one way a bit like Ford Prefect, trapped on planet Boulder with beautiful skies, as one very heavily indigenous leaning example of planet Earth in the multiverse might call it, he's sort of the key ingredient to the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo is inspired by my own reality. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Say no more. That's just world-building role-play talk. Is that he's a character doomed to sort of know, as a character in some... I forget where this is from. Is this from Men in Black, maybe? And I had this idea long before I saw it, and then I saw it, I'm like, that's a pretty good take. Not the way I would do it, but it's a pretty good take that was mind-boggling and cool to watch. But a person that... He's a being, that would be, in your terms, dear muddling, dear stoneling, dear treeling, dear earthlings of all kinds from the many dimensions of what you might call planet Earth, an artificial life form, right? Like, he's actually alive in the way that, Pinocchio wants to be a real boy, but is already alive, and that's sort of part of the magic of Aha. I don't know. I haven't seen the new Pinocchio. Not trying to draw a reference there. That's just Pinocchio predates Disney by many decades. I would like to point out Disney doesn't. They might own Pinocchio now, but they didn't invent him. And just like the mermaid, to get a little topical for all you angry folks out there in the real world that are disgruntled about the new mermaid, just enjoy the freaking beautiful voice and the fact that now people feel more included. What's wrong with that? They own it. It's their license. It's their intellectual property. They can do whatever they want with it. And the internet will have a foaming sea of turmoil fun about that topic forever. And there's my public statement about it. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. In my own Zeppoverse, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo is of no ethnicity of that kind, and therefore, has opinions that are way outside the box about all of it, which may or may not jive with some people and may or may not, make sense right away. But we're not trying to do a deep dive into that right this hot second. He is an artificial life form, but in a curiously inside-out, topsy-turvy kind of way. He is, and anyone like him, which there are, of course, reveals to be revealed within hidden reveals of other Zeppos and other beings that are not Zeppos, but that are essentially the same archetype, living out impossibly the same tortured multiplicity of infinite lives the way he does. But here's the topsy-turvy part. In the universe that he originates from, which is in fact a metaverse, mind you, a metaverse is a place wherein, in this universe, there are many metaverses, and a metaverse is a place which you might, from common parlance, say, is akin to some sort of meta-archetype of characters that are almost gods, to use the little g gods, not referring to any one particular system of thought, but rather, some carte blanche, big fictional palette place. They curate, attend to, in a sort of organic yet inherently cybernetically artificial kind of way, holographic kind of way, technology merged with reality itself kind of way, things that are individuated universes in what are ostensibly eggs, which they call something else, a word that I've yet to reveal, I think, in the discussion of the Zeppoverse. But these place things, containers, universes that are wombs, that are beings themselves, but sort of anonymized into a pod-like, and there is a bit of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge secret, like you can't avoid a reference to all the digital pets, whatever you called them, and there were many brands in each of the many worlds that you may or may not find yourself living on. But the keychain Digimon pets, right? Like, I'm not trying to rip from them, but imagine a whole living, real, fictional, literary, individuated universe of like, here's your setting, here's your world building setting that the author is trying to create. That is ostensibly, if you look at it from the outside, which, no living being technically can say about their own context, right? The microbial beings in your gut can't say that they could look at all of our world from an outside perspective, or could even begin to imagine it. And yet there they are, living their lives, minding their own business, doing what they do, and helping us to exist, right? That exists on all planes, on all levels, and all living, spiritual nodal point avatars of consciousness as a life form, whatever kind of life form you may or may not be, and or imaginarily identify as. So the thing in common and or different is that in your universe, there's only carbon, and you consider all life carbon-based life forms. And things that are not carbon-based life forms, even if curiously metals have carbon-based stuff in them, or you made a graphite actual literal carbon-based mechanoid machine person, you still wouldn't consider them alive, right? Generally speaking. Well, in this metaverse, there are some, beings of greater nature that are made of a thing that's very much like carbon, but fictionally, in the literary building universal kind of way, is what all life is based on, and everything that is not that is there, basically discriminatorily considered preemptively not life, no matter how lifelike it may be. And so in a wink, wink, nudge, 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 Westworld kind of way, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's incorporated singular body being, because of the trick of the way these eggs work, when he goes to be in one of them, in which there's an infinite multiplex of probability waveform functions, which is the word I totally failed to pronounce just a hot second ago, an infinitude things, the way there is arguably in our real, this is the human being speaking, the creative mind behind all this literary world building. Arguably, the organic living reality that we find ourselves in as human beings is also a multiversal, mind-bogglingly difficult to describe, infinite toroidal whirlwind of infinite universes of probable outcome, right? So, and you exist in your own sort of bubble of that sort of fractal recursion, in that you experience whatever you consciously choose to experience vis-a-vis your life choices, conscious, unconscious, subconscious, realized or unrealized, etc. You're playing your own video game, as it were. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. That's a joke, a metaverse joke. The incorrigible Mr. Zappo is a being bound by the rules of being dumped into this normal place in an avatar that's just like yours, but technically different, because he comes from a place where it would be, and therefore he can kind of exist as a super being. Is he a superhero? Is he a supervillain? Is he a little bit of both? Is he a super anti-villain that seizes? Does he live an infinity of life experiences so that he knows, in a sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you guys beat me to it. I'm not stealing from you. I had this idea when I was 9, and I just never got around to writing it. Dr. Zhivago kind of way. Wait, error, incorrect. Doctor, file, correct file not found. Dr. Madness, the MCU's Dr. Wizard guy, who I admire and love. But he and beings like him that come from the factory metaversal, and this is beyond the L space. For anyone who knows about the L space, put a pin on the corkboard about the L space. If you don't know, you'll find out in some of the Wattpad related episodes, which I've already drafted up, audio rough drafts, videotape dumpage. But I digress. Those beings in Mr. Zappo's home base universe, as a curator of different kinds of multiversal universal eggs, which are incubated and curated by these various beings, which all recognize themselves as sort of like a hive mind, individuated, semi-autonomous being that's got, part personal mind, part meta consciousness that is considered inherently divine, because all consciousness is divine. And they are here, expressly living out this purpose in a sort of zero-dimensional meta space, purely for the service of, facilitating this mysterious process by which these many untold number of universal egg things will ultimately hatch. Some unknown number. It may be the full amount. There may be flaws and or duds and or dead ends and or universes that quote unquote don't make it, right? Each one a universe unto themselves, and each universe for each living being is a very much, and this is a legit literary reference to the actual egg by whoever originally wrote it. It's often cited as anonymous, but I think there's also a real legit author. And there's also a sort of collection of many people's meta collaboration YouTube videos of the short story acted out for your contemplation, available out there. I am overtly borrowing and adapting and reinventing and reconfiguring the idea of an egg and setting it in a universe where there are these living meta robot angels, not angels. They don't pride themselves as angels. They're not referenced as angels, but some primitive tribe of flesh beings might encounter them and consider them as such, or invading alien robot aggressors. Who knows? It all depends. And he, in his own universe, has a mundane sort of like wake up to an alarm bell and deal with making breakfast kind of life and backstory, which is a closed loop of being an infinite array of these semi-autonomous, semi-hive mind beings, all of them which are, probably not called any names. I haven't really quite crafted and or revealed all that, but they have sort of a complex, their language is impronounceable in any human tongue. And humans, universally in this literary universe, do represent any and all ambulatory flesh pods of however many configurations are infinitely possible in the infinite array of infinite universes, unfolding all infinite possibilities, both in an individuated form and in the multiplexal form of, it's just a big sea foam of everything you can imagine, everything you can dream of is probably out there happening somewhere in a dimension quite thinly veneered right next to ours, but infinitely away that we can't jump across it until, there are ways to short circuit it because it is an object, if I may objectify it, which is something I strongly preach against in real life. Don't objectify reality, that's bad. But also, in this literary universe, it is an object, this egg, a living object that's revered as such and treated with respect, but which Zeppo begins to question as he, as are others in this place, are encountering a sort of excessive individuation experience, which some cinema nerds may say is a subtle or maybe overt reference to a brilliant movie from way back in the day, which if you love sci-fi, a serious cinema critic, which I am not especially not in any kind of licensed, got a university degree kind of way, would argue to you that, is a foundational stone in the creative minds of anyone and everyone that ever aspires to create sci-fi fiction, and that's THX 1131. I forget the final number. THX 11, 381, 391, 491, whatever the number is. It's a real movie. Look it up. It's the guy who made Star Wars and E.T. It's his very first movie. And it has occasionally been available on Netflix, I believe, and or HBO Max, maybe, and or I think you can rent it on YouTube, I think. 22, Golden Minute. That's a long enough episode to put it up and just be like, duh, there's an episode. Thanks for listening. Okay, let's wrap up this idea of this metaversal. This is my branding. By the way, do not steal my ideas. I do lay down these episodes, these audio episodes, both to share the concept and the storytelling in the way it's born out of my mouth for the purposes of capturing it and hopefully you joining in and like sharing in the imagining of it in your minds. It is an exercise of that, friends. Imagine a world. Join me in imagining a world where these semi-autonomous beings are experiencing a sort of like, wait a minute, what's going on? None of this is real. Wait, maybe is this all a lie? Of course, classic tropes. But this is the place where they acknowledge and know that these eggs are the very womb, the very living uterus, egg, cosmic, holographic rendering of flesh reality, of that you might call a living matrix with a capital M in the ancient spiritual sense of the term, which I think is the rightful heir to be brought back to acknowledge as we should respect this word this way and not use it any other way. But that's just the thing that I believe and that Mr. Zeppo believes, but he's very shy about sharing about, because in the world that he finds himself stuck in when he gets super individuated and sent into his own, here's a big reveal, his own private detention egg that is a dead-end egg. Here the eggs are to be born one day, right? And in the iteration that Zeppo finds himself, a generation has gone by where eggs were born, and no one quite remembers it anymore. But we know that those eggs, they hatched, and these divine beings went to do a thing somewhere, and all of us Zed beings, because that's what they are called, they all are just Zed, and I mean that in the way the English call the letter Z. They're all just various numbered letter Z's. Sort of as like if binary language is zeros and ones, then in the Zeppo universe, their language, if it had to be put into English, it's just all Z's, the letter Z, in low caps and in upside downs and reorganized directions. it's unintelligible. We couldn't speak it, but stuck here on this planet and nothing better to do and needing to create content that would sell and be readable and intriguing for audiences around the world, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo has, over many lifetimes, been cobbling away at writing these stories in a quote-unquote, this is all fiction, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, right? So he wakes up to a daily routine that is similar to yours in as much that there is something akin to a bed. And he is something akin to a body self. In this universe, he is made of carbon, which is considered quite rudely to be not alive. It's inert. It's not alive. Nothing made out of carbon is alive. That table's made out of carbon. This pencil's made out of carbon. The machines that, are conscious, are lent the consciousnesses, might in some day, if you were to sit down and be like, let's pitch some ideas around. Yes, all right, so these beings have a revolution because they realize that they are alive too, as alive as the eggs are. Are there overlords? Are there boss beings? Are there middlemen? Are there an overarching hierarchy? And what's that word from American corporate and political jargon? Not red tape, although that should get thrown into the word salad. Bureaucracy? Are there bureaucrats? Of course there are. But we're not focusing in on them. Zeppo starts to ask questions. Which others, there are rumors, whispers of rumors, have asked before too. And you can't help but think of, what's his name from, not Brave New World, but, that other one? Stranger in a Strange Land? Oh, so many books and so many references. And of course, everything Brazil, everything Terry Gilliam gets just infused in. For those who are into collecting tidgets and widbits of factoids. But imagine a world where there's, this sort of daily grind. And you show up and you curate and take care of the eggs, whatever that means. And you punch your clock and you drink your coffee, whatever that means. In terms of like a world that's a bit like Tron, but totally different. But definitely, the characters sort of look like my brand of Daft Punky and or video gamey drone characters. Something super original, but also, obviously, it's an archetype. It's everywhere in media now. And I just saw a headline to park for a hot minute and talk about real-life influences that have impacted my mind, but that I haven't read. There's a headline floating around. Someone, in tip of the hat, respect, not trying to infringe, someone wrote an article for some platform somewhere. And maybe I'm making this up for fiction, and maybe this is really real. I can't remember which now. I'm just going with the flow. My mouth is running faster than my brain can keep up with. About how there is psychological reasons why characters without a face are impactful and kind of unnerving. And I didn't read the article, but I was like, yep, I've known that forever, and I've always been fascinated by it. And I love mirrors, especially. Put a mirror where a face should be, and it's like, what is going on? Especially if you can create an experience where the audience sees their own face. And now in the reality of the world, like if Mr. Zeppo was a theater producer now and not a broken down, has-been that didn't quite make it large enough preemptively to have the partnership and the capitals and the means to do it just yet, vision boarding, he would create a theater experience that would tour the world and play in the largest venues in the biggest cities that pride themselves in being the hubs of the greatest technologies, and in the smallest corners of each of those capital nations, towns, and villages, and places in the world that don't get theater very much, and bring together audiences together to have a fun, weird experience where ultimately, no matter what the storytelling, which would always be adapted to the host environment and the host town and the host place, be augmented with holographic reality, impossible magical effects that are aided in part by, furniture that you thought was really there, but was actually a high-def screen depicting an image that then, is obliterated and destroyed by magical spells or whatever. And an experience where you, the audience member, somehow, individually, although everyone is called up on stage, you are the only one that does it, and everyone watches you because you're not really doing it. You're immersed in a live yet VR experience. You walk on stage and you have, an action adventure moment of your own, akin to the sort of like things that have happened in the real world. I want a tip of the hat, respect, not trying to infringe. Like, oh, there was a Vegas thing. It may still be there. It may not. I don't know how far in the future you guys are listening to this. But I remember going to Las Vegas and going to the Pyramid Hotel. Insert name of hotel. I can't remember what it's called. And it may have changed names over time. And I am not aware. I'm not up to date. I'm not even doing this live. I'm doing this to rough draft audio recording. You walk in, you're gonna watch a live late night talk show, and you're gonna be in the live studio audience. And there's cameras gonna broadcast it around the world, and there's gonna be a host. The host was on a high def screen, and the high def screen breaks down, and that's like the climax of the show, and then you get escorted out. And then there were real people, and but it's this really small audience, and you were in a forced perspective theater where you're told you're on the balcony and there's an audience below you, but you can't see them. And it's super well done. It was so good. I literally believed it, but I also went in super loving this kind of stuff. And this is when I was young enough to not finish college yet at all. I don't even think I was in college yet. I think this is the year I graduated high school. The summer I graduated high school, I went to Vegas with my dad to watch a boxing match and this. I think this is where this is coming from. And/or it's the made-up literary backstory for a character from a book that I'm writing, so don't steal it. Either way, the personal bits are my personal bits, and the real-life bits that may become part of fiction are just that. And please don't sue me, whoever produced that event. They were awesome. And also the boxing. I don't remember who played. I don't remember who won. I just remember, wow, this is what boxing is like live and in person. There's definitely an audience vibe energy thing going on. But there's a whole episode that I need to write about, Mr. Zeppo living multiple lifetimes, just going to live venue events throughout history and learning about audience energy, and how that applies to theater magic, no matter where the audience is. But it's most powerful when the audience is actually in a room together. But that's a whole nother sidebar. So it ties into a thing I described a pre-show moment in another episode recently, and they all tie together. One of the things that I would be doing in real life if I actually could afford to produce it in the imaginary high production touring way that I'm imagining it is the writer on tour writes the next things you'll be seeing 2.5 years from now while producing whatever show I've already produced, right? And it would be what do I do after I've had my coffee and I know I need to write? Because there are rewrites to produce for this show, and I've got my team of writing assistants. I would produce it all in a glass box, crystal cage, theater stage, false front that I would plop down either somewhere in the downtown space near the theater that I'm doing the current show at, or if it fits, in the very facade of the theater that I'm doing it in somehow. And then wherever I go, that would be the thing. And I would literally spend, 3-4 hours, unless otherwise legally not able to, drinking some coffee, smoking some weed, and maybe having a little bit of adult boozy drink, depending on my health and conditions and restrictions about performative, public, free use of expressive ritual art like that. And then I would write with a team of writers, but live on stage, so people could ask questions what are you talking about? What do you mean? What kind of character is this? Does the character have a face? We don't know. Does this incorrigible Mr. Zeppo poop? Yes, but not in the way human people poop, but also yes. And why does he get banished to a dead-end egg? For reasons yet to be revealed. But if we were working on that scene that day, or a scene where we would set the stage, and we would have whatever visual aids available in a sort of mini production in a crystal cage, in a crystal theater box, built in, so it's got no burden on anything else going on. It's got nothing to do with whatever. If I'm doing Blank Slate, the triptych cycle, which I haven't finished writing, but imagine in a world where I had, right? And we were on tour. It doesn't matter whether it's on Broadway, off Broadway, in San Francisco, in the theater to San Francisco, in some hotel in Theater Vegas section, doing legit theater in Vegas or whatever. There'd be all mid-afternoon, I'd be out there with my writing team, and we'd be documenting and filming it too, and getting audience suggestions and blah, blah, blah. And we would explain the scene. And if we had actors ready to go, we'd play it out. Of course, we got a writing team. They'd also be actors. Boom. Not a burden on the acting team doing, whatever it is, Blank Slate, episode 1. that night in the venue, right? 2 episodes, because there's always a matinee and an evening show. And then a different cast does a late night show, because I always want to do my Almost Daily Variety live stream from wherever we're at show. Hey, thanks for joining us, friends, blah, blah, blah. And it would just roll like that until like about whatever o'clock in the morning until I need to sleep. And then boom. I don't know how I would monetize my sleeping, but there you go. That would be the vision. And we would like print out pages, be like, thanks audience, you helped us write that scene today. And if you literally contributed live on mic, you would have stated your name. One of the deputy assistant writers would have noted it, verified it, taken a cool, ensemble picture of you and everybody else whose comments got in, and then we would it would go into the creation of the thing. And then whatever, 2 years later, boom, whatever that show was, whatever that backstory, whatever, the many adventures of DJ Zed Part 2. Their time stuck on this imaginary tropical island. And there you go, boom, play. Metaversal play with references to video games and music and acting about real scenes and real action and real storytelling, but also always zooming back to this like live streaming the treadmill of creating the stuff live in front of an audience. And speaking of which, my live stream's not even on. I'm just rambling. This is a rough draft idea for a podcast episode and to testing the limits of my own inventivity. This is going to be a Twitch, no, not a Twitch, sorry. This recording is going to be a Sprecher.com audio podcast exclusive until I get to reproduce it and reimagine it, re-listen into it in some sort of live stream context later on down the road. So good times. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for hearing me out. I know I probably created more questions than I answered, but in part, that's part of the madness. Maybe I rushed through it too fast, and it was too many words a mile a minute for your imagination to imagine ideas. Maybe I really need to double down and commit to like sitting in a deep live chat on a Wednesday for Wattpad Wednesdays, all day, all evening. But right now, I was supposed to go live at 9 o'clock for video gaming, and I'm not doing it because I got way wrapped up in this visualizing of some ideas. Glad I did it though. I'll be posting it at some point. And I'm glad you tuned in to listen to it. If you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, all the other content, be sure to visit solo.to/Mr. Zeppo and take yourself a self-guided tour through the many dimensions of the Zeppoverse. Until next time, friends, I've been your creative host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Peace out. Remember to be good humans to each other out there in the real world and in the virtual realms and in your imagination. End sequence. Stop recording. I said stop recording.